Hello everyone. Welcome to this very special program, Transportive Hollywood Power, Conversations with film director Michael Mann on the appeal of filming in Japan. My name is Yuko Kaifu, and I'm the president of Japan House Los Angeles. I'm so excited that we are able to deliver this program from the event hall of Japan House Los Angeles, which is located in Hollywood. Japan has been known as one of the difficult places for film production, film shooting by overseas production crews for a few reasons: cost, permitting issue, and language barriers. But in recent years, the Japanese government has been trying to improve the situation by simplifying the process, the permitting process, and providing financial incentives. One person who recently experienced this improved filming situation environment in Japan is Hollywood film director, Mr. Michael Mann, who has filmed so many mega hit films all over the world. He graciously agreed to discuss this recent location shooting on the streets of the city of Tokyo. We would like to hear from him his experience, perspective, and insight into this filming situation, improved situation in Japan, which happened just late last year in year 2020. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Consulate General of Japan in Los Angeles and JETRO Los Angeles, who supported this process immensely, without which we would not be able to carry out this program. And I'd like to also thank Consul General Muto, Akira Muto, who is joining us today. Thank you, Consul General.
Thank you.
Now, let me introduce Mr. Michael Mann, a person who needs absolutely no introduction, an award-winning film director, producer, and screenwriter. Director Mann has made enormous contributions in the film and television industry over so many years, over 5 decades. We're also very honored to have his presence today. Some of Director Mann's best-known acclaimed works include Thief, Miami Vice, Heat, The Insider, Ali, The Last of the Mohicans, Collateral, and so many more global blockbuster hits. There is no short introduction that I can provide to fully capture his great work. So we are going to show you a short video. Please watch.
You're on. They gotta be big scores, they gotta be fast. 1, 2, tops. Right.
Once I had a fortune. Live now, life is short, time is luck.
How long does it take you to go through a bank?
Oh, about 1 minute, 40 seconds. Flat.
Are you a businessman or are you a newsman? Because that happens to be what Mike and I and some other people around here do for a living.
Whoa.
Put the corporation at risk? Give me a fucking break.
Float like a butterfly, bang like a bee. Ah! Rumble, young man, rumble.
Now, let's welcome Director Michael Mann.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mann, it's so wonderful to have you here. Welcome to Japan House Los Angeles.
Thank you very much.
We've been looking so much forward to hearing from you, and thank you for making your precious time available for us out of a very busy schedule.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, and here also with us today is Consul General Akira Muto. Thank you, Consul General, as always, for joining us.
I'd like to thank the General Counsel as well, who was very helpful to us throughout the entire production.
Yes, Consul General, would you like to say a few words at the beginning?
Yes, I am pleased to join you here today as we discuss today the most important inflation industry in the world. At its global headquarters right here at Hollywood. And it's my honor to be such a great company as we will be hearing from the director Michael Mann, whom you all know. Over a year ago, I was asked by Yuko if I could help director Michael Mann get to Japan for location production. Japan has never been as eager as other countries to invite the Hollywood studios to film even the Japanese-themed stories in Japan. So these studios build the entire street scenes mimicking Japan, even in the downtown LA, as Quentin Valentino did for his Kill Bill. But when I met with director Michael Mann, Japanese government was just about to roll out serious programs aimed at attracting more film productions in Japan. The many agencies involved in these programs are here with us in the audience today. So what better case study could we hope for? The world-renowned director Michael Mann wished to film in Japan. So it didn't take me long to come to a conclusion that I would need to do whatever I can to get Mr. Mann to Japan. However, the COVID-19 made this trip incredibly difficult. So I needed to twist some hands of my colleagues back in Japan. And I'm sure that the COVID-19 created some disruptions in your production timeline.
Yes.
But we have turned the corner, and I hope we are now getting back to the normal. Now, Japan is blessed with incredibly beautiful filming locations, especially in the countryside, unique and intense city streetscapes as well. So today I will be hoping to hear from you, your experience about Japan, and your candid views as to how the various Japanese agencies have been working with you, and also how to unlock the potential of Japan as filming locations. And it would be my hope to see Tom Cruise doing his impossible missions in Japan someday. So thank you.
Thank you, Consul General, and I agree on the point of Tom Cruise.
Thank you.
Well, let us dive into the dialogue.
Sure.
And questions to be asked to
Okay.
Director Mann, if I may. Consul General, please feel free to jump in and ask questions and make comments.
Okay.
So the first segment of my questions would be focused primarily on the background of your decision to film your program in Japan. And you stayed quite a few months there in Japan. What was the most memorable thing that you experienced?
We stayed, it was actually quite a bit more than a few months. We were there in probably October and November of 2019, and then came back in the beginning of 2020 and started shooting in March. And then on March 15th, we had a hiatus. After only 6 days of shooting, we had to hiatus because of COVID. And then we, about 3 days later, we went back to Los Angeles. But we kept the production intact. And in fact, I kept my apartment in Daikanyama. And then we came back October of 2020 and finished shooting in December.
So you spent quite a bit of time in Japan.
A lot of really wonderful time in Japan, yes.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Daikanyama is a beautiful place as well.
Daikanyama is great. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But so did you not think of it? We were all under the pandemic and people had to stay away, isolate themselves. And why did you still think about going to Japan and do filming, location shooting in Japan?
I'd always wanted to shoot in Japan. I've been to Japan a number of times, and there are not objective reasons why. There's a lot of subjective reasons why that have to do with everything from Japanese cinema, my experience in Tokyo, a sense of I'm a big fan of William Gibson's novels, so cyberpunk. Set in Shiba City and then set in Tokyo, Neuromancer, Count Zero, Mona Lisa Overdrive. So there's just a sense of urban Tokyo, and also the films that I had seen, particularly the film noir and Japanese New Wave. So I was very excited with the prospect of finding locations there and shooting there.
I see. Yeah. So there was the potential energy or desire to do film shooting in Japan.
Yes, yeah, and particularly urban. And we were faced with a decision early on whether to shoot in Tokyo or Osaka, and which is an easier place to shoot, and I preferred Tokyo.
I see.
Because I wanted to, Tokyo, there's only one Tokyo, and that was it. And so the cityscape, the nightlife, the architecture, everything. So.
But Tokyo is supposed to be one of the most difficult places to do location shooting, but you still wanted to.
Yes, yeah.
Right, because of the reasons that you just said. In comparison with other cities, other big cities, Tokyo was by far.
And I've shot in a lot of them. I've shot in everything from Maputo, Mozambique to Jakarta, which is nightmarish traffic, to Hong Kong, to Kuala Lumpur. I've shot all over the world. And Tokyo is very different for uniquely Japanese reasons.
I see. But what was the most difficult points of shooting in Tokyo? What was the biggest challenge for you to shoot in Tokyo?
One of the biggest challenges was probably securing locations. One of probably the biggest challenges is tranquility. Because there's such a wonderful cultural respect for tranquility, but when you're doing a film production, tranquility sometimes is not allowed. You need to get answers, and sometimes getting answers is very, very difficult. And the kind of answers that serve us are a yes or no. No's are very valuable because then you could move on to the next alternative. But so it was difficult sometimes to get answers on locations. The locations that present themselves are spectacular, from small neighborhoods like Akabane, we shot a lot in Akabane, to Shibuya, to Shinjuku, to Kabukicho, those nightlife areas. So the potential is spectacular, and for a number of reasons we can go into, it's difficult to actually get what one needs to be able to forge ahead. So we did, but it was.
Is that partly because of the pandemic, because of restrictions, or would it be the same?
No, I think it would be the same. It wasn't because, it was before the pandemic, when we left, and then also when we came back. So it wasn't so much the pandemic.
I'd like to ask you about filming process. So there is, of course, procedure like permitting and things like that. So you want to choose a particular park to film your scene, and then you tell your crew that, okay, this is what I want to, where I want to do. But then they have to go through the process, the procedure, permitting process. Was it really bothersome?
The process is a little bit different. It starts with, on any film I do, I visualize what I want to see, where I want to set action. And then that becomes kind of a choreography or program for the whole of the movie pilot, it doesn't matter. And where you go from something simple like 2 scenes need physical compression. You want to be in rooms with low ceilings and feel closed in. And on the 3rd scene, you want to, there's an explosion of energy or something and you want to open it up. But then the real inspiration comes from when you're driving and you're around and you're scouting and you see things and where we're going to set the scene. Okay, it's going to be in a nightclub, but what kind of nightclub? And so then you scout 10, 15, 20 nightclubs, and then something sparks in one. That's the place. We have to be able to shoot there. So, and then I take a lot of photography of it. So then I don't do storyboards. I do kind of photo storyboards, and I take images as if I'm shooting the scene there, and I do some blocking. So I now become fairly invested in have this particular nightclub. And then begins the process you're talking about, like how do we get to the nightclub and get permission to shoot. That becomes difficult. There's a number of remedies. I may be going further than you want to go with the answer to this question, but you run into permits and permissions. And the question is, how is Japan, that you're asking me is how is Japan, particularly Tokyo, how is that different from other big cities and other countries for filming? And there's a number of answers to that. We can get into that now if you'd like.
Right, I guess the Consul General wants to.
Just go back to the challenges part. You are one of the first Hollywood directors to try new programs. To attract the more film productions to Japan. In what way can we improve these programs? How do you compare our location incentives to other countries?
You mean the incentives? I don't know exactly how the Japanese incentive works. I know that it's terribly important. Most countries have them now. The one geographical place that doesn't have them is right here in California, Los Angeles. So it has one, but it's a lottery. But the really successful ones, one wants to look at the UK in particular. That rebate program is spectacular. I don't know how long ago it began, maybe 25, 30 years ago, but you can't find studio space in London because so many pictures shoot there for the last 20 years. Italy has just instituted a tax credit, an Italian tax credit, which is 40% of what you spend in Italy on things Italian, you can get a tax credit for, which people then sell to companies that need a tax credit. So consequently, the film industry in Italy is booming right at the moment for the same reason. If Japan seriously wants to track production, it needs to have a very robust incentive. It needs to be a rebate. It needs to be a tax credit. The Italian tax credit vests within 30 days after the 30 days you spent the production dollars or lira or euros. In the UK, it's a little bit different. It's you finish shooting, but if it was used or consumed in the UK, it qualifies for that rebate. It's very substantial. So those incentives have worked.
So I guess both the permitting process, which should be expedited, and also financial incentives, which is huge.
There's some other things as well. Yes,
right.
Well, the rebate and the incentive is excellent, and it absolutely requires it, but it's fruitless if there isn't real serious coordination with being able to actually obtain locations and help in shooting. And that requires a film commission that's working on behalf of the filmmakers. And with all respect, the Japanese Film Commission is very good, but it's primarily there to protect city, Tokyo anyway, is there to protect Tokyo rules and regulations. So it doesn't really facilitate it. And there also needs to be real coordination, which either a film commission can do or the government of Tokyo can do in the following ways, and that is to coordinate with mayors of prefectures. And we did have that. We had excellent coordination after we went to see the governor, which was assigned here, organized for us, particularly in Shibuya. And we had coordination with both the mayor, with Mr. Hasegawa, and his two right-hand men, and then also somebody in the police department, Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, Detective Ashikawa, and community leader we wanted to shoot, Mr. Yasumoto. There was a shrine that we particularly needed to get, and it took that coordination with the community leader, who also could have been an Akabane, it was a group of merchants, and the police, and the mayor of Shibuya, and that's how we were able to.
Yes, I remember at one point you came back to me asking that you feel that you're not talking to the right person.
Right.
And so I introduced you to the governor, Koike.
That's right. And
but what role was the, in terms of the providing the one-stop, coordination service to the filmmakers? What role was the Japanese Film Commission playing in this respect?
It wasn't really playing much of a role.
Okay.
When we met with the governor, she picked up the phone, called the mayor of Shibuya, and the next day we were in the office, and the next day we had permission, we were able to shoot.
Right.
And that's the kind of cooperation you need. And sometimes, by the way, what a film production wants is impossible, and that's okay. But if you get a quick no, that's okay too. But it's the maybes that kind of say, I don't know. I think, as you can appreciate, our logistics are very complex when we shoot. So it's that kind of top-down, organized coordination. Another very important thing is, which doesn't exist in Tokyo, is specific permitting. For example, I wanted to blow up a car in Hong Kong on Central, which is the busiest thoroughfare in a tiny city that's very crowded and there's a lot of traffic. And we were given permission to do it from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning. And that's okay. And we had something called ITC, which is intermittent traffic control. So we could stop traffic for 2-3 minutes, shoot our things, make our explosion, and then we let the traffic through. And we had with us, as you often see in Los Angeles, we had with us Hong Kong police. And so it was formalized. And part of the difficulty in Tokyo, there's no formal system of permitting, and that would be extremely helpful to productions.
I see one of the reasons why you did not get yes or no immediately is that because of the lack of the mechanism, or
well, it's also because every country you go to shoot in, the film crews you depend on and the people you present, it's always different. So there are tremendous benefits to shooting in Japan, for example. The art department, the spirit and the energy and the commitment of the crews to perfection is fantastic. Ota-san, our production designer, Shitsu, who's my B camera operator, we went back to shoot for 17 days in December, end of November, December 2020. I only had 11 Americans on the crew. So the crew was mostly Japanese, and the shooting crew was quite terrific. That general sense of the base expectation that the crew member has for himself is perfection. So that's very much a plus. In some other departments, for example, production or location departments, because obviously we're in a different culture, and there's cultural relativity, which we respect. But if you're asking me what would be helpful, it'd be more helpful if some of the other departments were more direct. So there, for example, to use this example, locations, it would be difficult to encourage our people to go high enough to ask. So we would be getting a tentative answer, and then only after a lot of examination we realize, well, you're asking somebody who's very low on the great chain of being. And, so then it's, so getting to somebody of authority.
I think that's an important point. Right?
Yeah.
Not all the directors will be able to see Governor Koike. So we would need to create a mechanism that would allow all the directors from Hollywood to be able to sort out the permit authorization issues.
Correct.
So I think Japanese Film Commission would need to craft a mechanism that would solve these issues, as you may.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful, and also involve the police, because the
police.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Los Angeles, we use off-duty police to be with the film company, and that's very helpful. There may be a different solution in Tokyo, but to coordinate with the police, because they're respected. There are unique neighborhood circumstances in Tokyo that a film production must conform to, and that's good, but we just need to know, you need to know what they are. So, for example, we had a terrific relationship with the merchants and residents in Akabane, where we did quite a bit of shooting. To the point where I could walk into one convenience store and everybody knew me, and it became like family.
Oh, is that right? That's beautiful.
So it was great. When he had a dojo upstairs and a collection of old radios. I mean, I know everything. So it became very, very fun. We shot like 2 or 3 scenes there.
Yeah, I guess that if there's a structure, is there a set protocol? It would not take time, even if you go to a junior person, because the person could not really say yes or no because she was not quite sure, right? So I want to make it happen, but maybe I can't. So and you ended up going to the top person.
Right.
I really do hope that there'll be more Hollywood movies shot in Japan, because we're losing to countries like Australia or New Zealand or some other state in the United States. So I hope that you be able to encourage others to.
Oh, absolutely.
And we do our share to improve our incentives and structure and processes as well. Well, one thing that I would also like to ask you is about, you mentioned briefly about working with the crew, Japanese crew, and also you selected, and some of them you handpicked the actors and actresses. They must have had some language issues, but can you tell us a little bit about casting process and filming?
The casting was a real surprise, because I had no idea how it would be directing through a translator to Japanese actors. And I had no idea how Japanese actors would be, and it was shocking because they were so good.
Oh,
I mean, the casting process was kind of crazy, because it was one actor after another it was really quite extraordinary. Hideaki Ito, Shun Sagata. Rinko Kikuchi, who's known to Western audiences, Ayumi Tarida, who I cast, although he wasn't in the pilot episode, Kazuo Tanabe. I mean, there were so many, and then of course Ken Watanabe. But the work of the actors was extraordinary, and it was a little strange, because sometimes when you're casting and you're directing, it takes you some time to work into making that connection where you really have an interior dialogue between myself and the actor, and it was very facile and very easy working with actors. And
but they had to speak in English, or
no?
They did not. I see.
No, so some of the Hideaki Ito, can speak perfect English. He understands as much English as I understand Japanese, which is 0. So he's, but he sounds like he does, and he understands a little more.
And Ken Watanabe, of course, speaks
Ken
very good
Ken
English.
yeah.
Right. So I'm glad that. So you value their expertise and talent in terms of acting.
Well, but it's it's very difficult. It's very unusual because I don't really know what I expected, but I found myself in the presence of 6-foot-tall kind of young Robert De Niro's or something. I mean, really, this pure artistic talent. Very, very exciting.
I'm glad to hear that. It's so encouraging. And it must have been a great experience for them as well to be able to work with you, with your team. It's a very rare opportunity for not only the actors and actresses, but the crew as well.
That I couldn't speak on because for me, if I'm working, I'm just working, and you're just making the connection. So I'm not really self-conscious of how they're perceiving me, in those circumstances.
But it's easy to understand or imagine because, as Consul General was talking about, there are not too many Hollywood movies to be shot there in Japan. So it must have been a very rare opportunity. Many actors, actresses want to come here to be in the Hollywood movies, but it's not that easy. So,
well, it's not easy. It's also a very robust industry in Japan, in television and movies, and some of the actors like Hideaki Ito, he's very busy on other television series.
Sure.
Working with the crew, we had many translators, even when we had a lot of translation happening, and working with some crew who Japanese crew who spoke English, we kind of figured out that any meeting you had, how much time will it take? And it was about 2.5. It just took about 2.5 hours longer. We'd have had exactly the same thing if we were in Mozambique and speaking Portuguese. I mean, it's nothing. That's nothing to do with Japan. It has to do with just the factor of it. So communication, isn't always an issue.
How about the staff? You said that they were good. The Japanese staff members. You have some specific episodes or some experience that you want to share with us in terms of working with them.
Here's the kind of problems one would have. I had a Japanese camera operator, and who spoke some English. No, he didn't speak English. He was a third camera operator, and very long lens, a 500-millimeter lens, and with a translator. And I would say, whatever you do, don't pan down. But he heard pan down, so he pans down. so these kinds of, so you just have to know that that kind of thing's going to happen. The costume designer was excellent. Seyeon Choi, she's Korean. Kanako Nishimura was the hair and makeup person. And we don't normally think about that, but it is critical. And she was fantastic. She was as good as, and I've worked with some of the best in the world. And she was world class. Spoke no English whatsoever, but she was she was world class. The Sachi Watanabe, Naomi Nakai, Ko Iwagami, who did the casting, and Yoko Yamashita were quite terrific. There is sometimes with a A-list Hollywood crew, the energy output on day 1 and day 67 is the same. There's no attrition. And that's not the case in the rest of the world. But it is the case in Tokyo. There was, the energy level that was there with the crew was a constant, regardless of what the demands are. And we had some very long days,
Well, I guess that it was because of you, at least portion of it, because they were inspired by you, and you have maintained high energy as well.
I do maintain high energy. That's very complimentary, but I don't think so. I think there is a.
If they are watching this talk, they must be very flattered by your comments, and that allows them to even grow higher. So thank you for educating our people.
Right, but I think Japanese crews on the whole are very hardworking. You know, so.
Good to know. I hope that there will be more opportunities for them to work with major Hollywood studios and directors like yourself, because it would, as Consul General said, would be really good for their growth.
Right. Yes, the more production, you know, the more productions that American productions they work on, you know, the better. You know, there's differences in the again in production, people like location managers and people who are functioning in production management that are different, and it's simply it's not. I don't know that it's anything that one would change or could change, because every culture is relative, it's different. There's an attitude in the United States on locations, for example, a long time ago, that when someone says you can't rent this location, stop asking. That's when you first go to work, because you never take no for an answer. Okay, that doesn't work in Japan, you know, and it never will. It's a completely different system. It's a virtue in a way, because it means if somebody doesn't want you to shoot there's no amount of money, you know. In Hong Kong, the Hong Kong location manager would show up with a paper bag full of cash. That won't get you anywhere in Tokyo. So it's just very, very different. Yeah.
I'd like to ask you something a bit more or aside of your film location in Tokyo. As a director, you have so many years of your career established in this movie industry. Is there anything that you cannot budge, you cannot compromise, that you firmly believe in, essentially important for you?
Well, first of all, not everything is important. And so there's an art in knowing this is critical to have, and I absolutely must have it, and if something else is kind of less important. You know, if I want 150 extras, but you can't fit them in, and you can only have 75, you make do with 75. That's not a big deal. Other things that you know are critical, because I'm tracking with what I believe is the storytelling. So it's a critical path, and it's really critical path planning towards a narrative outcome, right? So I know that this scene is the end of Act 2, and it absolutely has to be a spectacular scene, and it has to be very emotionally moving. And so everything about that scene is critical. The scene leading up to it may not have been as critical. So you know what's expendable, what components are expendable, and what components really are not.
So you filmed so many movies in all over the world. So for you, doing location shooting rather than in the studio set is important to pursue your passion, or is that?
Right, I'm very inspired by locations. I love location shooting, and I like going to real places and immersing myself into a culture and doing that research ahead of time, and then making that come alive for audiences in ways that inspired me when I was involving myself in it to begin with. So that's why I'm attracted to locations, and why I'm attracted to distant locations particularly. So sometimes it's, on Ali, we were shooting in Mozambique because you couldn't go into the Republic of Congo, where the rumble in the jungle really happened. You know, or if there's a reason to be shooting in Hong Kong or Malaysia or Indonesia or Dominican Republic or Uruguay. I mean, I've shot all over. So it's somehow really transforming that inspiration I felt, converting it into something that is kind of encoding it into something that is going to add meaning and create a scene through which these actors are going to move, and something emotional happens, because audiences are brilliant. We are all very bright animals, and as animals, our perception is much wider and more encompassing than we know. So all these seemingly small and irrelevant things are not irrelevant. They're all really important. Yeah.
So you were there in Japan, staying there for more than a few months, going through all the difficulties, challenges as well.
Right.
But then you had you enjoyed working with the crew and actors and actresses as well. Would you go back to Japan for future?
I'd love to. It'd be great. You know, I mean, part of the problem with shooting in Tokyo was the aesthetics, because there's so many things are aesthetic that is completely distracting. I mean, I could walk down the street and I'm looking at the design of the manhole cover, at the masonry on a corner. I watched some guy who's laying bricks, and he's the perfection of a mason laying bricks. So it's exquisite, and it's magical. So my wife was with me, and we had the Tsutaya Tea Site bookstore about 100 meters from our apartment, and you know, it was great. There's something magical happening around every corner.
Is there any other city than Tokyo that you're tempted to do location shooting in the future? I mean, of course, it depends upon the nature of your film.
Sure.
But if you have any specific area?
There's something that we're developing right now that would probably shoot in Modena, which is north of Bologna, in Italy. So.
Anywhere in Japan?
Oh, anywhere in Japan. I don't know. I spent some time in Kyoto. It would obviously be a very different kind of film. There's many. I don't know that much about other regions in Japan. The John Lesher, who studied in Japan, speaks Japanese. He spent a lot of time traveling in Japan, and he's told me about many magical places to go to. We never had the time to do it.
That'd be fantastic if you have a chance, because it's good for the community as well. As you were talking about, people in the neighborhood would get to know you, get to know your team members, and becomes like a community spirit, so if you could give a chance to that kind of opportunity to get to know you about the Hollywood filmmaking in other municipalities or cities in Japan, that would be fantastic as well.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. During the pandemic, of course, they're having a lot of film locations or filmmaking putting on hold.
Right.
And they came up with some ideas of augmented reality and virtual reality, doing things remotely. But do you think that after the pandemic is over, the way to make a film would change, or do you think that it's got to be substantially the same?
I think it could be substantially the same. My first assistant director is a man named Joe Reedy, who is one of the best assistant directors I've worked with. He did a lot of films with Martin Scorsese, and he was part of the Directors Guild of America team that put together the protocols of how to shoot safely during COVID, and we followed those very rigidly, and included testing every 48 hours in a zone system where the crew was divided up into different zones, and you had to stay in your zone and kind of bubbles and like that.
I now like to get to
the point I'm trying to make is that film crews can be very flexible and can innovate different ways to organize very quickly, and I think we were able to do that and still shoot on locations and do it safely.
I see. So there may be a little bit of adaptation or ways to make it happen.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I see. Thank you. So I'd like to cover a few questions among those submitted by our audience. Consul, do you have any further comment, or are you okay? So we did receive quite a few questions, and some of them were already covered during your discussion. So the first question is, thank you for your speaking with us today. Can you see a superb crime saga such as Heat or Collateral be reinterpreted through a uniquely Japanese lens with a Japanese city, say Osaka, as the backdrop? I think that the person may be asking about reformatting or remaking of your film in Japan.
Okay. He could be set anywhere. The core of it is the two main characters, and they're in a dialectic conflict with each other. One's the thesis and the other's antithesis of the other. And so that story could be told anywhere.
I know that you cannot do the Last Mohican in Japan.
Last Mohicans could not.
So the next question is, please discuss the importance of visual atmosphere in your films. Heat comes to mind as both an ode to Los Angeles and captures the energy and sights of the city. So I guess that you covered some portion of it in terms of the visual atmosphere in your film. But do you want to add something like visual atmospheres in your films? Heat comes to mind as both an ode to Los Angeles and captures the energy and sights of the city.
That's very relevant to exactly what we're talking about, because Heat shot on more locations in Los Angeles than any other film that had ever been shot in Los Angeles. And when I shot it in '95, I'd been living here for 25 years, and I scouted into neighborhoods that I'd never set foot in before. Los Angeles County is very balkanized geography, very balkanized place. There's the Caribbean neighborhood in the middle of South Central. There's the Samoan and Fiji enclave in San Pedro. There are all these places, and so the point is that when you want to make the city this exciting environment, you get out there and you move through it like crazy, and you'd want to do the same thing in Tokyo. That's exactly it. But then what one discovers, you want to be able to capture. If there's something in a little side street next to a viaduct in Yokohama, you want to be able to get there and capture it and shoot it. And if it's in the community interest of a city to be captured that way, then there has to be the kinds of coordination, improved coordination that we're talking about.
So the next question is, what was the most unexpected thing about filming in Japan? Were there many surprises, or good or bad?
I think we answered some of that. One of the best surprises was the rapport I was able to get with the actors, the Japanese actors, and how close we became. And we're working with Ansel Elgort the same way, who now speaks Japanese. And this is a pretty pedestrian answer, but how much we really love living there.
I see. So it's more so than other countries. Like you were talking about some of the other countries, your experiences there, but it was even more so in Japan? Or is...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've spent a lot of time in London. Went to graduate school there and lived there for about 6 years, and gone back there to shoot. And I grew up in Chicago and spent 6 months there shooting Public Enemies about 10 years ago. On one hand, we're drawn to go back to Tokyo. On the other hand, we have 4 wonderful daughters here and grandchildren. So we're pulled. So the solution is wait till after COVID, take everybody over there.
Right, that would be wonderful. How about food? I mean, when I see Hollywood movies being shot here, there's a huge food trailer and people can eat whatever. It's really mouth-watering kinds of food trailers there. But then in Japan, usually you're provided with bento box every day for every meal, right? Did you find it a challenge?
Yes, that wasn't inspiring. The restaurants around are pretty terrific. There's one in particular called Falo, F-A-L-O, that we were in Daikanyama that we habitually went to.
Daikanyama is known to have so many nice restaurants,
yes.
So I'm glad that you could have a chance to go there and enjoy the fine dining there. I know that we are running out of time soon, but if I may ask you a question about your career, I understand that you were inspired to see Kubrick's movie, Dr. Strangelove, in 1964, and then decided to go into this industry. But can you tell us a little bit about how you decided? And then if there's, sorry, this question popped up into my mind just now because I want you to give some good advice to young people who are aspired to make themselves film director or actors or actresses.
Every story is different. I was an English major and didn't know what I wanted to do, and with my life, and it was torturing me. And then somebody told me, well, I'm taking a film course. It was the first ever film history course at the university I went to. And I thought, oh, terrific, I'll get 3 credits for going to watch movies. So I went, and I was completely knocked out, and I knew, I remember the exact moment it happened. It was 10:30 at night in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was freezing in the middle of the winter, and walking down this hill on a starry night, and it just struck me, you've got to make movies. That's it, you're going to be a film director. And that was it, and it just changed my life. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and it made tremendous sense, and I was just dedicated myself to that, ever since. And at about the same time, Dr. Strangelove came out, and the significance of that was that it was an artistically independent movie with tremendous integrity and a large production, and meant for mass audience. And that's exactly, to me, that was an illuminating moment when I thought it's possible to make personalized cinema with integrity for a mass audience. That's exactly what I wanted to do. There's so much inspiration one draws from Japanese films, and I've watched them, my whole life. And there are some that I thought were particularly inspiring. One is Pale Flower by Shinoda, and of course I was Drunken Angel, which I think is his first ever movie. That was another influence. There's one scene in particular, and when I shot I was inspired by the opening of Pale Flower. These inspirations happen, and I think it's a fantastic thing to do with your life.
Wow.
So I would encourage anybody who wants to make cinema to go make cinema. It becomes a unique experience. I can meet somebody I haven't seen for 10 years, but we were in the trenches intensely together for 65 days, and it was like, it was 1 week ago or something. So you become veterans of these intense experiences. And they're very communal. It's a communal experience.
Wow.
They're very collective. Yeah.
What an inspirational story that you shared with. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you more, but then the time is up, so we have to wrap up. But thank you so very much for...
I have to thank this gentleman in particular because he was very, very instrumental to us in many, many key moments that helped us be able to do this, and both in getting back to Japan, and then also the introduction to
we are absolutely for working more with the Hollywood. So I very much appreciate you coming out today to share your experience with Japan. I look forward to working with you more in the future.
Good. I look
Definitely.
forward to it. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much, and I hope either on vacation or filmmaking, I hope that you would go back to Japan after the pandemic.
Yeah, great.
So thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you for the audience for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did a lot. And hope to see you again soon, either virtually or in person here at Japan House Los Angeles in Hollywood and Highland. Thank you.